Okay, since we've been talking about things that are taboo, we figured we'd keep that going and have a discussion about money.
Yes, today's video is all about money and finances, and specifically how we handle money in our marriage.
Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, I'm Steph.
I'm Katie. Little Theo is having a treat because he didn't want to sit still. But yeah, if you're new here, welcome. We are a married lesbian couple from Vancouver and the creators of Let's See the World.
So of course the topic of money can be a bit taboo or uncomfortable, but it's super important to talk about, especially in the context of relationships and marriage, and that's why we wanted to have this discussion today.
For sure. So we will be talking about how we handle money and finances in our relationship and in our marriage. We're just speaking from personal experience, so we're not saying that like our way is the right way, but we did just kind of want to open up and share like how we handle it and maybe some advice for you, and how we have come to be able to communicate about our finances in our relationship over these past 11 years.
So Katie and I, like probably a lot of couples, have a very different background when it comes to personal finances and just kind of what we learned or didn't learn growing up. So it was really important early on to communicate with one another and kind of get on the same page despite the fact that our backgrounds are totally different.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, and I think that everyone's kind of relationship with money and how they feel about money, how comfortable they are with finances and everything like that, it comes down to kind of what you saw modeled for you at home growing up, and also just like what you did or didn't learn about money when you were young. And yeah, I think we both have very different like experiences when it comes to that, so we can talk a little bit about like where we kind of came from and then how we sort of met in the middle and like learned together to manage it all as a couple.
Yeah, so my parents were really transparent about, finances, and they really wanted to teach myself and my sister about our personal finance growing up. Luckily, they were in a position to set us up with things like retirement funds and stuff like that, but instead of just setting up those accounts, they did really teach us along the way how to contribute and what that meant and when we can draw money from those accounts and in what situations. So I really felt like I got a good education at home, and
You're so lucky.
Yeah, I honestly feel super lucky, and it really set me up for success as an adult. So as soon as I was getting, paychecks, I knew exactly what to do with them. I invested my money wisely and really, I set us up for success as a couple as well.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously were so lucky to have that. It really speaks to just like the privilege and, certain families that that people get to grow up with that knowledge, because obviously like we don't learn these things in school. Like imagine if we learned about like personal finances and taxes
practical
like in school, like these practical skills, because if you don't learn it at home and you're not learning it at school, like you don't learn it. And these are really just like crucial life skills that I feel like so many people don't have. So obviously you are very lucky to have that, and I know you know that because that did really set you up for success and set us up for success as well. My experience was very different. I would say that money was something that was not really talked about in my house, and if it was kind of like a source of tension or something that, was like argued about. It was a bit of a sore subject. So I wouldn't say I grew up with like a great relationship with money. I did start like working when I was like 14 years old. I moved out and was supporting myself financially when I was 20. So I did have to kind of learn how to manage my money on my own. Nobody taught me how to do that. And when I was living on my own as a very young adult, I was, a performer. I was working kind of like paycheck to paycheck. And then as I was growing my career and I was starting to make more money and like booking like high paying jobs, I was starting to like make more than I needed. And that was the first time I was really like, I don't even have a savings account. Like I don't know how to manage my money. I don't know what to do aside from just like paying my bills. And so I really just tried to work on like educating myself. And then that kind of continued when we met. And I had to go through like a long journey of learning how to kind of empower myself to feel confident in handling finances, confident in talking about money and all those things. And yeah, I think we both kind of learned together how to like manage it as a couple.
And I think something important to note as well is, when you're working freelance jobs or contract positions, like, you aren't just getting the tax taken out of your paycheck. You actually have to understand the system. You have to, save before tax season, and
Totally.
you also get to claim expenses. So
Right.
it's even more complicated than just having, you know, your regular paycheck,
Right.
a salary position.
Right.
So, you know, getting thrown into kind of the deep end as a 20-year-old.
Yeah, and being, self-employed. I mean, we've both always been self-employed,
Yeah.
so you're right. There's like a whole learning curve that comes along with that as well, because it's not as simple as just like getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
for me, I was like working gigs and teaching at like multiple different studios and having money coming from like so many different places and making sure I always had enough to pay my bills and everything like that. And I do think that that really taught me a lot, because I just had to. Like, I just had to learn how to be an adult. I just had to learn how to support myself. I was very stubborn and not ever wanting to ask for help or anything like that. And so I just like had to figure it out. And I do think that that kind of taught me a lot in that time. But I do think when we met, I was probably not as comfortable talking about money. I wasn't as like confident in, just like having conversations around finances, everything like that. I really didn't know anything about investing or anything like that. And so we probably had a lot of those conversations early on as to just like what money would look like in our relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, you know, seeing how my parents were with money and how they worked together, there was always a lot of trust in that relationship. And so I personally never felt like there was anything difficult to talk about when it came to discussing finances or spending or money with you. Which I think, you know, kind of opened the door to having these conversations. And
whereas I'd never done that before. Like, I mean, neither of us had really been in super serious relationships before we met, but certainly I hadn't. I wouldn't consider any of my previous relationships to be like serious adult relationships. So I'd never dealt with any of that before. I'd never lived with anyone. I'd never like shared expenses or anything like that. So that was all really just like learning the first time how to navigate all of that.
Yeah, I think right away, I kind of encourage you to get the tax-free savings account, the RRSP, all of the things that are in place that you can really optimize to kind of make your money work for you. So I think that was kind of the entry point of us discussing money. And then really soon after that, we did decide to pool our money together and share a bank account. We had so many. I don't
remember when exactly we did that.
I think it was when we moved to Toronto, so it was 2013.
Okay,
so it was only a couple of years in, but we had so many shared living expenses, and it, you know, instead of constantly keeping track of who owed what and paying each other back, it just made a lot more sense to have an account that we could just put money into and draw from as we needed.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, we moved in together like 9 months into dating. And at that point, we were like, you know, we each owe this much for rent. Like, we were splitting things, splitting groceries and everything like that. I think, you know, we've always kind of made around the same amount. You owned property, so that was kind of the main like difference. But in terms of our income, it was always fairly equal, so it was easy to like split things. And we were both always comfortable with that. And then, when we moved from Vancouver to Toronto, that was 2 years in, and that was really us like, you know, committing to building a life together. And at that point, I think it did make sense to kind of just like merge everything and put it together. And I know that not all couples do that. Lots of couples, even who are married and have been married for a long time, don't merge their finances.
And
I think that's totally fine.
That is totally fine.
That's just something that we've always done, and it's worked well for us. We both still have accounts like in our own separate names, but we really just keep like total transparency with all of our spending, with everything. Like, we just put it all together, basically.
Another key factor that went into the decision to merge our finances was the fact that we were also getting shared income through rental properties. You know, from almost the very beginning, we've kind of leveraged our properties and had rental income, whether it was us going away on trips and renting our place out while we were gone, things like that. So, you know, it started off small and then it built into something bigger when we were doing short-term rentals with our place in Niagara and here. But that's always been a factor as well, because we had income that was, you know, equally for the both of us. It didn't make sense to have that come in and then split it and then also be paying each other back for expenses. It just made sense to have that come in and then the money come out of that same account.
I think also early on, we really discussed like what our financial goals were and what we really wanted to put our money towards, because when you're building life with someone, like, hopefully those things align in terms of what's important. And I know that for us, we always talked about like travel being a big priority, saving a lot of our money for travel experiences. and hoping to one day like travel full time, which is more so what we ended up doing. And also just knowing that because we're both self-employed and we figured we always would be, making sure that we were setting ourselves up for like long-term success, making sure that we had like a proper retirement plan, because when you don't have a regular 9-to-5 job, you're not really set up with those things, and you really have to make sure that you are planning for it yourself. And so investing in property has always kind of been the way we've planned for that, and that's always been a big priority as well. And that really comes from like your background and your experience with it, and kind of showing me just the importance of it and how that can really just set us up for the future. Okay, so we wanted to move into kind of our 3 main tips for navigating money and finances in a relationship or in a marriage. So the first tip is really just getting clear on your goals as a couple, your financial goals. I think that's something you could really talk about like very early on in dating. Especially if people are, dating and they're a little bit older, and like you're very clear on what those goals are. I think that's something to be really upfront about, because if people do have very different ideas of the future, or very different spending habits, or very different just like priorities when it comes to money, I don't know, that might be a deal breaker. That just might be something to kind of work through like early on in a relationship, so that it doesn't become a problem. Because I think like research shows that money is like the number one like relationship killer. Like it's just something that people really like clash on, fight about, all these things. And so getting really clear on that from the beginning, I think, is just so important.
Yeah, definitely. Because then right away if you align, or if there are compromises that you have to make. For example, you could want to save all your money and invest in real estate. Your partner could want to save up money and then go on a big trip and spend all the money.
Yeah.
So, even within that, even if you're not perfectly aligned, you can still just understand where each other is at, and then make compromises, as you need to.
Yeah, and kind of plan out how you'll navigate those things. Like if you do decide to move forward in a relationship, but you know that you don't really align, or you're not completely compatible on all those things, just figuring out how you'll navigate that, what that means. Like, are you going to keep your finances more separate?
Right.
Are you comfortable merging them? Like everything like that. I really don't think that it's too soon ever really to have those conversations, especially if you're getting into a relationship that you know is going to lead somewhere serious. It probably just like eliminates a lot of problems down the road.
Yeah, and starting those conversations early just means you'll be able to have those conversations as things get more complicated, because diving into those conversations when things are really complicated can be super uncomfortable and can be super tense. Whereas if you kind of start off small and, progress with those conversations as your relationship progresses, then I think it's a lot easier to have open communication and healthy communication.
Yeah, because it's not something that can be avoided. Like naturally, if you're sharing your life with someone, the topic of money is something that's going to come up a lot, and it's just something that you have to deal with. You have to talk about. You have to figure out how to talk about it if it's not something that you're comfortable talking about. Like it's just, it can't be avoided. So I'd say just start working on that right from the very beginning.
Definitely.
So that kind of leads us into tip number 2, which really is learning to communicate about money. Again, I don't think this is something that everyone is just naturally good at. I know I personally had to like really learn how to talk about it and be open to talking about it, but it really is so important, because there are just so many factors that affect a relationship naturally when it comes to money and finances. So things like being able to be transparent about like spending habits, things like that. Like you said, building a sense of trust in the relationship or in the marriage, I think is so important. And also just being able to communicate about the realities of a relationship and how there can be, different like power imbalances and things like that for all kinds of different reasons. Like if one partner is working and the other partner isn't for whatever reason, maybe they're a student, or maybe they're raising the kids or anything like that, or just natural power imbalances when it comes to like
age difference.
Yes, absolutely.
Same-sex couples versus non-same-sex couples.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there are so many factors, and obviously you don't want those things to fester like resentment or anything like that. Like you want both people to feel like equals in a relationship, and I feel like if you can't discuss money, it's so easy for those things to kind of create problems down the road.
Yeah, so again, obviously communication is key. And really, these conversations are kind of unavoidable. So I think a lot of people, they let them get to a boiling point, and then it becomes, the source of an argument. And instead of letting it get to that, like Katie said, have those discussions early on, open up about the small things, and then you'll be able to continue having those conversations as things maybe get a little bit more uncomfortable.
For sure. Yeah. We talk about money all the time. We've talked a lot about how things just look differently because we're two women as well, right? Like, there's no just like natural, like aside from you being a few years older, like there's really no power dynamic.
Being two white women, the playing field is pretty level for us.
Yeah, I mean, aside from you just having grown up with more money, that's something that we also talk about, and we make sure that, like, you know, I also feel very like involved in our finances. We want to make sure that just because you've had more experience, that doesn't mean that you handle everything and I don't know what's going on. Like, we have those conversations so that both of us feel like equals, both of us feel just like confident and empowered in our financial decisions, because I think that's so important. And it is just really empowering, honestly, as two women, to feel like we have a say and to feel like we have control over our money and our financial decisions, because there would have been a time,
not that long ago,
yeah, exactly, that we wouldn't have been able to have our own bank accounts. We wouldn't have been able to have credit cards. We wouldn't have been able to own property ourselves. So the fact that we can be here, like, as a lesbian couple and manage all that ourselves and like feel financially stable and feel like we're making good money decisions, like, it is really empowering.
Yeah, definitely. So naturally in a relationship, one partner might kind of take the lead on handling finances, paying bills, you know, just being a little bit more involved in that process. And that totally makes sense. But I think it's also important that the other partner, who is maybe taking more of a backseat to the actual process, still feels like they have a say, especially when it comes to making bigger decisions.
Definitely.
So they might not be paying the day-to-day bills and stuff like that, but, you know, it's still important that they feel like they have a position or a seat at the table.
Yeah, and also that kind of dynamic was established because you both wanted it, right? Like, if one person's like fine not handling the day-to-day stuff and they're happy for their partner to do that, as long as that's something that you discussed and that you kind of arranged because it works well for both of you, then I think that that's a good arrangement. It really all just comes down to communicating about what you both feel comfortable with, and talking about it all like continuously throughout your relationship, I think, is so important, because as you get older too and as you're together for longer, like, there will be bigger financial decisions that have to be made. There will be other things that come up, you know, like, now that we're older, you know, we're choosing not to have kids, so that's not a factor for us, but we are planning for our future, what that looks like, and, you know, what we will be using our money for, and owning property, and all the things that are priorities for us, running a business, everything like that. Like, these are conversations that we have continually, and planning, you know, for the far future of like one day when we're going to retire and be little old ladies together and all of that.
Yeah, little old ladies.
Okay, so I think the third and final tip that we're going to give is that it's so important in any relationship for both people individually to keep working on their relationship with money. I think for me, that's something I probably had to work on a lot more than you. I think you had a more positive relationship with money, whereas for me, it always kind of felt like something that was stressful, something that was hard to talk about and everything like that. But it really is something that you can work on, and it really helps so much to work on improving that relationship. And for me, that just really looked like kind of knocking down some of these beliefs that I used to have about money, about, you know, the fact that I wasn't deserving of making more money, or that I would never be in a stable financial position and I wouldn't be able to ever afford the things that I wanted in life and all of that. I think I've really been able to like unlearn that, and now I can get to a point where those things just don't feel true for me anymore, and I feel just like proud of what we've built together and proud of what I've been able to do myself, and yeah, just gotten to a really good place with it. So I do think that work can be done, and I really recommend doing that work. Both people in the relationship working on their own relationships to money will just really improve your relationship together.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously my journey with improving my relationship with money looks a little different, but for me, it's been all about education. So I have really taken the time to educate myself about all the different factors when it comes to personal finance. You know, here in Canada, there are a lot of government incentives or resources to help you grow your wealth. A lot of people don't necessarily know about that. And again, it's something that was not really taught in school.
Not at all.
So things like retirement savings plans and how you can draw from that if you're purchasing property. A lot of people don't necessarily know that you can draw from your retirement savings plan, but you can. You just have to pay it back. But there are all sorts of government programs like that will help you out. There's a first-time homebuyer tax credit. There are tax-free savings accounts and other kinds of things that the government has set up to help you. It's
sure.
really just a matter of learning about all these programs, learning how to use them, and really optimizing your money.
Yeah, I do think it's really important if you have the resources and the time to just, teach yourself as much as possible, because there is so much out there and there's just so much to know. It can feel very overwhelming and intimidating. I know I was very intimidated at the idea of like investing and just had no idea like where to begin. And there are so many things now that are perfect for like millennials, like people our age who, you maybe don't want to be like so hands-on involved, but you also have no idea what you're doing. And there are things like robo-investors, everything like that. A lot of them come with like free financial advisors and everything. Like, there is so much out there if you can just kind of take the time to learn, and just know that like if you don't know, it's not your fault. It's not your fault for not knowing. It's not your fault for not, growing up with this stuff or feeling super confident. Lots of people don't, and it's okay. It's okay to just be like starting from scratch learning, and it's okay to just not know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully you found this interesting, to get a bit of background on kind of our journey and where we're at with personal finance. And then also, the tips. Hopefully some of those you can apply to your situation or just be a kicking off point for more research.
Totally. And if you do want any more videos on this, we both now are very comfortable and enjoy talking about money and finances. And I do just think it's something that's so important to talk about. Again, it's one of those kind of taboo topics that everyone says is like rude to discuss, but that's another reason why no one knows what they're doing, right? Like, because nobody talks about it, because no one's just like openly having these discussions, it leaves so many people left out, not knowing, not feeling empowered with the knowledge. So again, I think it's just important to have these conversations. So if there is anything else you want us to chat about, whether it's like investing in real estate or just personal finance in general, or anything else about like money in a relationship, let us know in the comments below, because we're happy to discuss it more.
Yeah. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We put out a new video every Friday.
Yeah, so thank you so much again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.